On the morning of May 18, 1980, an event took place in Washington state that forever changed our landscape. At precisely 8:32 a.m., a 5.1 magnitude earthquake underneath Mount St. Helens shook loose millions of tons of earth and rock. 24 megatons of energy blasted hot ash and gases as high as 80,000 feet in less than 15 minutes. It would then circle the globe in 15 days.
As my duties,
Hal Kolb was a helicopter pilot for the Washington National Guard. 30 years ago, his unit was in Yakima at the beginning of their 2-week annual training. When they heard that the mountain had erupted, they stepped outside and saw the giant boiling wall of ash rapidly approaching.
Yeah, we had our Sunday morning brief, which was at 8 o'clock, and they had just gotten the word that the mountain had erupted. And so they informed us, and we all went out and could see the, the ash plume, which is at that time probably getting up, 50, 60, 80,000 feet. It was awesome. That's the only way to describe it. You'd never seen anything like this before, and as I said, it was the plume was just rising, and it was covered the whole, western part of the sky, and it was just like a big black avalanche and lightning coming out of it, and it was just, it was almost, terrifying.
Another pilot that flew missions that day, Jess Hagerman, saw the same thing from his helicopter over Fort Lewis.
I mean, the power of that thing is unbelievable, watching something like that. And, it's just boiling and black and doing all kinds of things. There were people in earlier who saw lightning, coming off of that stuff.
Hal and his crew barely escaped as volcanic ash began to rain down on eastern Washington, plunging cities into total darkness on what was a sunny day.
And I went back, grabbed a bag, went out to the helicopter, got the pre-flight done, and then they came down and told us to, crank the helicopters as the ash plume was approaching Yakima. And so they told us to crank, and we all cranked. And then as soon as we had started, got the helicopters cranked, they told us to shut down. And there was about 5 of us that ignored that, and and I was the last helicopter to get out of Yakima, and this was actually as the ash was hitting.
Many people owe their lives to these 5 crews who disobeyed their orders to shut down. They were some of the first helicopters to bring out survivors on the first day. As the pilots struggled to gain altitude, the falling ash made for poor visibility and extremely dangerous flying conditions.
And I had vertigo so bad that you swear when you get in deep vertigo that you're in a terrible turn, and with the training that I had, of course, you just say, hey, the gauges, the instruments are right, I'm wrong. Go with the instruments, and it's so difficult. It's almost one of those situations where you almost have to grab the cyclic with both hands and just look at the instruments to keep yourself upright. Anyway, it seemed like an eternity, but we missed the mountains, and we finally broke out at 8,000 feet.
Your depth perception is off, your visual cues are off, and I'm grateful that nobody had an accident. I thought about it. After making that first landing, I said, I don't think I want to do this again. It's, like I said, the hard part is you're looking to save lives, but yet you don't want to destroy lives doing it.
Bob Watling was the state aviation officer at the time of the eruption and coordinated rescue efforts around the volcano. His reaction to the eruption was one of an overwhelming sense of devastation.
The area of complete and utter destruction was so much larger than anything I imagined.
The blast was merely the first catastrophe to claim lives that day. Melting glaciers from the mountain's summit sent powerful lahars rushing down the Toutle River Valley, uprooting trees, smashing houses, and destroying anything in its path.
Aspects of the entire episode that I didn't dream of when I was first starting to worry about where I was going to get fuel and things like that. Then the mud flow. Who would anticipate a mud flow? Would you anticipate a mud flow thinking about a volcano? Neither did I.
And it wasn't just the aviators that responded to the eruption of Mount St. Helens. Soldiers and airmen helped man roadblocks around the mountain, and they cleared the streets of eastern Washington of an ever-piling mound of volcanic ash. After the third day, the weather conditions changed, which allowed them to safely land their helicopters. The mission then changed from search and rescue to recovering the dead.
You know, once we started extracting the casualties, and which started on Wednesday, after the first Wednesday after the eruption, we finally got some snow and rain, which packed down the ash, and so we were able to safely land. Like I said, the horrifying part was, taking the bodies out, especially families. And
after the dust settled and the numbers were tallied, over 200 homes were destroyed, along with 27 bridges, 15 miles of railway, and 185 miles of road. 57 people lost their lives. Despite these grim statistics, these three guardsmen look back on the disaster that was Mount St. Helens with a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction.
We were the first on the scene. We did do the first rescues, and probably ended up saving quite a few people because of that. That's our job, is to take care of things when there is a disaster, which St. Helens was. It was a major disaster, and it could have been, 10 times worse.
There was no question about what the Guard did. I mean, there wasn't anybody else out there exactly.
Mount St. Helens was, as some said, one of the Guard's finest peacetime hours. And I think that's right. That's a fair analysis.
Washington State has 4 other active volcanoes. All have erupted in the past, and all will erupt again. When that happens, the Washington National Guard stands ready to respond.